All right, let's just jump right in. For something like 75 years, global trade has basically played by the same rulebook. But that's over. As of early 2026, that playbook has been, well, it's been tossed right out the window. We're talking about a completely new era, where the entire idea of trade policy has been flipped on its head. And that's what we're going to break down right now. What's really going on here?
So you might be asking, just how big of a shift are we talking about? Well, get this. In January 2026, the US actually threatened to slap tariffs on 8 of its biggest European allies. Now, this wasn't about some economic squabble. No, this was about pressuring them to sell Greenland. I'm not kidding. Tariffs for territory. If you need one single example of how much the game has fundamentally, completely changed, that's it.
And that really sets the stage perfectly for our first big idea here. We are in a completely new era of trade. By 2026, you see, tariffs had evolved. They're not just these boring economic tools for tweaking a trade deficit anymore. Oh no, they've become frontline weapons, used to hit some really ambitious foreign policy goals. We're talking about making global trade serve geopolitics, not the other way around.
Here's a good way to think about it. For decades, global trade was kind of like a sport, with a clear rule book, referees, the whole thing. You had organizations like the WTO making sure everyone played fair. Well, now, it's more like a street fight. There's no rule book. The only thing that matters is how much leverage you have. It's just a massive, seismic shift from a system based on rules to a system based purely on power.
Okay, so if it's a street fight, what's the game plan? Well, that brings us to the America First framework. This is the official policy, the doctrine, and it's all built on 3 main pillars.
So here they are. Pillar number 1, go after what the administration calls unfair trade balances and do it aggressively. Pillar 2 is all about China. The goal isn't to completely separate the two economies, but actually to use their interconnectedness as a bargaining chip. And finally, Pillar 3, redefine what economic security even means. It's not about global supply chains anymore. It's about building up manufacturing strength right here at home.
And this next part, this is where you really see just how radical the thinking is. For years, economists would tell you a trade deficit is just a number. It's the result of big, complicated things like how much a country saves versus spends. But the America First view, it just flips the whole thing on its head. It says a trade deficit isn't just a number, it is proof that the other country is cheating. And the only answer is to hit them with tariffs.
All right, so that's the theory. But how does this play out in the real world? Let's zoom in on a really critical example, India. Now, India is supposed to be a key strategic ally of the US, but it has found itself right in the crosshairs of this new, pretty coercive trade policy. Just look at this number, 75%. Let that sink in for a second. That's the total tariff rate that India, an American ally, remember, could be facing if everything on the table goes through. It's just a mind-boggling figure, and it shows you exactly how intense this new approach really is. So how on earth did an ally end up in this position? Well, it happened incredibly fast. Take a look at this timeline. It all kicks off in April 2025 with a 25% tariff, just for the trade deficit. Then, boom, August comes along and another 25% gets tacked on as a penalty for buying Russian oil. And as if that's not enough, by January 2026, there's a threat of yet another 25% for doing business with Iran. And look, if you had any doubt about what the real goal was here, just listen to this quote from the Treasury Secretary. He comes right out and says the tariffs were a huge success because they forced India to stop buying Russian oil. But the really telling part is at the end. I would imagine there is a path to take them off now. See? That's the whole game. These aren't supposed to be forever. They're just bargaining chips to get what you want. But don't think for a second that India is just rolling over. Not at all. They're making some big strategic moves of their own. They're scrambling to diversify their trade, pushing through a huge free trade deal with the EU, fast-tracking other agreements all over the globe. And, get this, they're actually doubling down on their relationships with Russia and China, the very countries that sparked the conflict with the US in the first place. Okay, so let's pull the camera back a bit. What is all this doing to the rest of the world, to the global economy? Well, it's been a massive shock to the system, for sure. But there have also been some really surprising results, including this weird paradox where the US economy itself seems to be holding up.
Yeah, this data is pretty surprising. I mean, tons of experts were predicting total economic disaster from all these tariffs, but when you look at 2025, the US economy was, well, it was surprisingly tough. The tariffs brought in a ton of money, over $236 billion. People kept spending, which kept GDP growth high.
And because retailers were fighting so hard for customers, they absorbed a lot of the costs, which actually helped keep inflation from getting out of control.
So in this new world order of trade, who's winning and who's losing? Well, this chart makes it pretty clear that the pain is not spread out evenly, far from it. You look at countries like Vietnam and Mexico. Their whole economies are built on exporting to the US. They found themselves in a really, really tough spot. All of a sudden, your country's vulnerability is tied directly to how much stuff you sell to America.
And this is the really big takeaway. This whole approach, doing things on your own like this, it's a direct assault on the entire global trading system we've had since World War II. The absolute bedrock principle of the World Trade Organization was something called most favored nation status. It just means you have to treat all your trading partners the same. Well, that's gone. It's been replaced with a system of one-on-one threats and backroom deals.
Which of course leads us to the biggest question of all. What happens next? Because the truth is, this entire policy is kind of hanging by a thread. It's facing huge legal fights at home, and as you can imagine, it's creating a ton of uncertainty all around the world.
And at the absolute center of that legal fight is this one law, IEEPA. It's an act from back in 1977, and it basically gives the president a whole lot of power to mess with the economy if there's a declared national emergency. And that's the key. The administration has based its entire tariff strategy on this law, claiming that big trade deficits are a national emergency.
And that right there is the multi-trillion-dollar question that is now sitting in front of the US Supreme Court. Was this emergency law ever meant to be used like this, to just slap massive tariffs on everyone? A case called Learning Resources versus Trump is about to give us the answer.
And you really can't overstate how high the stakes are here. If the court rules against the administration, well, it's not just a setback, it's an existential threat to their entire trade policy. It could wipe out the legal foundation for pretty much all of these tariffs overnight. That would force a total reset, sending them back to square one, having to ask Congress for permission.
So that's what this all boils down to. This one final question. We are standing at a genuine fork in the road. Is the future of global trade going to be governed by a shared set of rules the way it's been for most of our lives? Or is it now all about raw power and who has the biggest economic stick to swing? The answer to that question, well, it's going to shape the global economy for generations to come.